Okay, I think that's running. Okay. Okay. All right. So on the combat metrics par screen, the screen may have changed slightly because, you know, as you can tell, this was done a couple of years ago when I put this together. But there's several things to look at around just parsing, and there's a lot of information, right? And I'm kind of a data geek, and I do this professionally in my real life, so that's kind of where this comes from. But you know, so on this screen, this is your information about the parse. So obviously, you know, if you're doing a trial dummy, it's 21 million damage, and the damage per second DPS is 21 million. And if you take the damage, then the numerator would be time, and you take the total time, which in this case is the 3 minutes 32 seconds, right? And you convert that into seconds. That gives you your damage, you know, divided by total seconds is what your DPS is. So it's one way you can quickly check to see. It's not the only way, but it's a good way to check to see if a parse has been faked. So that's that first box here, DPS, right? Now the light attack weave, if you read this part up here, that's a really important statistic. And this is before the Velothi amulet came to be. Your light attacks make up a very significant part of your total parse. So if you can see here in this example, the light attacks made up almost 11% of the damage, right? But Velothi is a little bit different, the Velothi amulet, because what it does is it basically says, you know what, we're only going to give you one DPS or 1 point of damage for every light attack you do. But what we're going to do instead is boost all of your other damage up by, what is it, 10% or something like that. So it's a trade-off, right? And the reason why it's a really good mythic for some builds, particularly the Arcanist, is because a lot of their damage comes through the beam. So, right, as an Arcanist, you want, if you're trying to do a lot of good DPS, what you're going to do is try and maximize your beam damage. So it means, you know, getting 3 flails in and then beam, right? That's going to be sort of your prime source of damage. But because depending on which beam you use, it's going to last 4 to 5 seconds, you're not going to be doing as many light attacks. Hence, if you actually look at the light attack average for Arcanist in a good parse, it's not going to be anywhere close to a DPS that's not using the amulet. Okay, does that make sense? So if we look now back to what I was mentioning before, let's go to the next page here. So here's the info page, right? So when I say the weaving average, right, this is a box down here. So are you familiar with these numbers here? So the weaving average. Okay, so the weaving average, this 0.095 seconds. So if you think of the way the damage works in ESO, there's what they call a global cooldown. There's a global cooldown on skills, which is 1 second, and there's a global cooldown on skills. That's completely independent of your skills for light attacks, which is 1 second. So where weaving comes from is it says, because those two things are completely independent of one another, you want to, on average, be able to, if you're trying to maximize your damage, cast 1 skill every 1 second, and you want to cast 1 light attack every 1 second, but you want to do it in such a way that roughly about every 0.5 seconds you're hitting a skill in your skill bar, and then the other 0.5 second you're hitting a light attack, right? So what this weave average does is it looks at how many total skills you cast and how many light attacks, and says how close are you to that kind of perfect weave. So in this example I'm showing you, based off the total skills cast and the total time, it's saying that on average, I'm hitting a skill every 0.095 seconds. And if you look at the total time of the parse, it calculates how much time you wasted. So in this example, 18.47 seconds roughly, I could have fit in an additional 18 more attacks, either skills or light attacks or both. So this is a really important metric when you're trying to look at how tight your parse is, meaning, did you kind of reach perfection in terms of time wasted. So this number here is what I call the time wasted, and the weaving average is how close are you to 0. Now for Arcanist, this number, let's just say if you're not an Arcanist, like, just a regular TPS, it's not wearing Velothi, this will generally be, like a point. This is pretty good as is. It could be a little bit tighter, but Arcanists I've seen generally around a 0.2 to 0.15, kind of in that range on average for what I would call an acceptable parse that would get a tag. If you're hitting 85K or higher, you're going to be somewhere south of 0.2. But obviously for non-Arcanists, regular DPS build, non-Velothi, it's going to be much lower. Now, if you're looking at something like you use light attack helper. Okay. So, there's another metric that could be used, which is one that light attack helper calculates. And it's sort of the inverse of that. And that is to say, are you close to 1.0, meaning are you casting a light attack every 1 second? So in general, a good parse is going to be like a 0.9 or higher. Velothi is obviously going to be less than that. It's probably going to be like in the neighborhood of maybe a 0.7. But I wonder if I have that. Yeah, light attack helper. Well, I can't blow that up, and I'm not in ESO right now, obviously. So I don't know, does that answer your question? Any other questions on CMX? There's a lot of good information as CMX that a lot of people just kind of pass over. A trial dummy, yeah. There's a few different versions of trial dummies. The 21 mil dummy.
How do you keep
your a trial dummy or just a non-trial dummy?
trial?
So the trial dummy will give you synergy sources. So every now and then you'll get a prompt to synergize. So you want to take every single one of those because those will give your resources back. So that's number one. Number two is your food choice. So make sure that you're using, most people would say parse food. So whatever, food works for you. And then probably the third one is make sure you're not overcasting skills. So this is something particularly for newer players that if they're parsing, they will refresh a dot or something like that before it's necessary. So while the dot's still doing damage, let's say it has another 5 or 6 seconds to go, they'll refresh it anyways, which is not only lost DPS because you could be casting a skill that needs to be refreshed or hitting your spammable instead. But you're also wasting resources because you're casting something that's already doing, you're recasting a skill that's already doing something. Okay. Any other questions? You can tell this is pretty old. Look at the gear on this. Depths and Kinras. Look at that. It's ridiculous. Nobody uses that. Nobody uses Kinras anymore. Okay, so why don't we go to, we're going to change topics and talk about what we're here for, which is ESO. And I will forewarn you a bit because if you're kind of a data guy, we'll geek out a bit. Excel, how many of you guys use Excel and are kind of comfortable with it?
I do.
Okay. So we'll get into that in, let's see, let's just do ESO logs. Boom, it's pulling up. Okay, this is a VCR3 that I did a while back. We'll just kind of keep this window open. So why don't we quickly do just a very brief overview. And well, let me throw out another question to the group. How many of you guys kind of regularly kind of poke around in ESO logs, and how comfortable are you in finding stuff?
I am.
Okay.
I look at it pretty
Okay, good. It gives me a sense of kind of how deep to go and how fast. So we'll make this more of sort of a experienced beginner type overview, and then we'll go from there. So when you open a ESO log, you'll get presented with something like this. So in this case, this is VCR, and it will it'll break your fight down into encounters. So this encounters and trash fights is the entire trial, or the entire time that this thing was recording. So what ESO logs does basically is it's a two-part system. You have to have a application running on your computer, and there is also a data center somewhere that is receiving all this data. But what it does when you start ESO logs as a user, you say, here's the name of the trial, and then you start it up, and then you go into the game and you type in a little command within ESO to actually get the data stream running. And what it's doing while you're in the trial is it's sending a data stream that's getting captured either locally, and then you have to upload the file, or if you're doing what they call a live log, it streams the data and captures everything. And so this is just nothing more a huge data file that has a web interface that you can now analyze the fight in a lot of different ways. So when you open it up, the summary here at the very top left gives you a timeline of the encounter, and then what you generally are looking at here is the damage. It's the very first thing you get presented is what's the overall team damage. And then raid composition obviously is who, in terms of players, were in this. And then it has 4 panels, one for damage, healing, and then deaths and damage taken. Okay. And then, of course, you can start to peel back the layers and look at different things. So if you want to look more specifically damage done, these menu items here at the top allow you to dive into those. Now, the ones that are most interesting, obviously, is the summary, because it gives you a nice quick overview. And you can quickly scan these panels and say, okay, well, where was I, right? It's generally the first thing people want to know is, okay, where was I in the list? Like, how did I do? So, so this is me in this trial. So I was second DPS, and then the healers will obviously want to see how did I do on healing. And then, who's taking the most damage, and deaths is also really important. People want to know, well, how did I do in terms of deaths relative to all the other persons in the trial? And you can get a much more detailed view of those up here. So for example, if you want to look at healing, you can click healing here, and it breaks it down, and it shows, again, by player, who did the most healing. And if you, again, what they call drill down, let's say we take a look at this warden healer, we can drill into this warden healer and actually see, well, what skills were they using? So which skills did the most in terms of healing? You can see this one's a little bit different color. This is called barrier. And the reason why barrier is considered a heal is it's actually damage mitigation. It's damage that was never really got through, but the barrier, because it's it's kind of included in this healing group, it's more of a shield. So this is damage shielded instead of damage shield. That's why it's a slightly different color. And then healing springs, and that just kind of goes down there and shows you what percent. Shows you total cast and all that. So there's just a ton of information in here, and this is just one individual player, right? So buffs and debuffs are also important. So depending on the role you have in the trial, oftentimes the raid leader will assign you to provide certain buffs to the team or debuffs on the enemy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Deaths are also important because the top question teams also often have is, well, what's causing all of our deaths? Like, our team is dying a lot. Like, what are we dying to? Like, and how can we mitigate that? So this will tell you all about that. Interrupts may be important depending on the fight. Some things, need to be interrupted. So it's good to know like who's doing those interrupts. And then, this is resources. Like, how did we do on our resources? Like, were there times where we completely out? So in this example, it shows if there's somebody in the group that was like completely out of resources or super low. And then casts is also important. So this is also a good metric that players use, particularly raid leaders, to see who seems to have really good light attack weaves. Because as I mentioned more, the tighter your weave, meaning which equates to more damage, it means you're casting more skills per minute, you're casting more light attacks per minute. That all equals more damage. So you can see in this example, this player Fate was at the top, and the reason why is because, well, most of these people are arcs, so your arcanists are going to be lower than everybody else. Tanks don't really light attack weave. They're more heavy hitters than anything else, and healers should be light attack weaving. So here in this example, this healer has a pretty good high average, but in this case, the Zenkosh Zenkosh don't usually use the mythic, so they do, I would expect this person to have a high cast per minute. Okay, so from there, why don't we start looking, we'll actually go and take a look at sort of a common scenario that people are looking at. So in this case, so if I actually want to look at my damage, so this is me in this trial, if I want to actually look at what I'm doing, I can look, click on Arcanist for all, and this blue line represents a team average. Okay. So I can look and see how did I do on average relative to the team. And it looks like in most of the trial, I'm kind of above average, which is not surprising because I'm second to top. Or I can compare myself to another individual. So I can come up here to this chart and you can see these little lines. You can turn off total, and I can compare myself to like Predator Reaper, who is extremely good. He's one of the best Templar DPS I know. And just compare myself to him, and I just find him on the list here, and I can click on him, and I can see, he's actually, there's some portions of the fight that he did better than I did. Like, so if I wanted to zoom in on this fight, right, this is the part where he outparsed me. I can start taking a look at, why is that? So if I wanted to look at, if I want to look at death at that particular moment in time, I just come up and click, and this is where I'm looking at a specific time clip in time. And I can see, well, it looks like I died. So I died to Dark Drain, and okay, so I was dead for some period of time during this. So that would explain, you know, if I'm dead, I'm not doing DPS. So you can start to look at things like that. I really like this feature where, you know, you can actually drag, you can just click and drag over a period of the timeline, and it's like zooming in time to actually take a look. And all of the stats associated to that will be down below. Okay. So let me pause here. Any questions at this point in time? Yes, you do have to go to esologs.com. It's not part of, it's not an add-on. It's actually a separate application. It's pretty lightweight. It just runs in the background. Yeah, you won't be able to find it through, whoops, Minion, yeah. So there's some other things you can do to compare yourself, you know, as far as stats between two players. I don't know if you can, if you want to play with this, but for example, if I wanted to select, let's say Chrome, and I want to compare Chrome to Aurelicious, you know, I can compare them. And so let's drill into this kill here. And it shows, you know, what their skills were, what gear they're using, shows what sort of damage they did. So, you know, here it looks like, you know, one's using, getting a little bit more damage at a pragmatic freight carver. So it's kind of an interesting tool. So what you'll find oftentimes is you're like in a trial and you're seeing somebody that's exact same class as you, but they're doing significantly more damage. So this is a good way where you can go in and compare yourself and saying, okay, here's me. I want to be like, you know, Jim Bob, who's playing the same class, and you can go in and compare yourself and actually look and say, okay, this person's got a different skill. So for example, here in this player, he's using anti-cavalry caltrops. This person is not. So, oh, he's using Xenas. So maybe this guy was asked to run Xenas. This guy's using Vigor. This person's not. Obviously, this person was probably a portal DPS, where Be Malicious, I think, probably was an orb killer, if I'm not mistaken. Other than that, the gear looks pretty close to the same thing. Yeah. Okay. So it's an interesting tool to use. I think on a personal level, if you're interested in just seeing, you know, one player versus another. One other one that's really useful, and this is more for raid leaders, people that are really into raiding, is this replay. Have you guys used this much before? So what replay does is it basically, the data stream records where everybody was standing in the arena at any given second. And it will show deaths and whatnot. So we can actually watch a replay. Actually, let's look at a specific fight. We'll go to, just pick one, that one. So now we're in pull or wipe 5. And if we hit the replay, and then you come down here on the bottom, there's a timeline. So there's a play button on the lower left-hand corner. And you can change the speed. If it's going too fast, you want to slow it down because maybe you missed something and so on. And then these markers down here on the bottom right, these squares, this is sort of like a key that tells you, you know, who is who. But we can zoom in a little bit, and you can, if I just paused it, and you can see here down here, this is where we're at on the timeline. But if you hover your mouse over, you can see, okay, our main tank is this necro here. This symbol here represents Zamaja, and then we're all stacked up as a group, you know, in the first part of the pull doing DPS. And you can see the healers probably should, so that's one healer in the back, and then this is the other healer. So the healers are in the back. This looks like the off tank. And then all the DPS are over here. Okay, and I'm not sure. Okay, that's one of the arcs. So, and then we can play it. And okay, so Sorry popped in. Oh no, these are the things at the top of the arena. Okay. Okay, these are the malicious spheres. These are the little, what they call the grapes or the orbs, and these need to get killed. Now it's interesting. You'll see over here on the top right, this also tracks the health. So you can see, you know, a lot of the spheres are getting killed. This one is still open, sphere 3, and you can see sphere 3 is almost dead if you look at the health right here. So you can also track, you know, how quickly things are dying, where people are at. So, you know, let's say, you know, we can see here that this is our kite healer back here. Our main tank is going over to run over and get Ton and Zamaja. I think that's our off tank, probably. So you can see one thing, somebody already died because there was a shade. No, I'm mistaken. Down here, you can also see the health of individual players. So, okay, so Mel just died. This person died because it's black. And what we can do is see on here, again, hovering. Looking for the shade. Okay, this is the shadow of the fallen. This is the shadow that needs to get killed. I'm just going to fast forward. Again, this timeline down here, you can, if you want to, as I mentioned, you can slow it down. If it's going too fast, you feel like you're missing something, or you can speed it up. So I'll just do it ×2. Okay, let's pause it. So here, all of these things here, these represent the shadows. So in Vet Cloud Rest, you know, when you die, there's a little, I call them shades, but they're called shadows of the fallen. So these have to be killed for the corresponding player in order to res that team member. So you can see that's what these are that are popping up. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people dead. Okay. So that's pretty much what there is to replay. All right, so why don't we go into more of a raid leader's point of view, like what are raid leaders really looking at? So I lead a couple of cores, and what I wanted to do is share with you some of kind of what raid leaders look at. Now, I'm not saying that all raid leaders do this. This is just one of the things that I do. And so I tend to be on the spectrum of different raid leaders. So I'm definitely probably more on kind of the data-driven side. So can everyone see the spreadsheet here? So I put together this and I track kind of the team progress. So here, this is one of the cores that I run, and we've been running for 20 days. So what's 10 weeks via C hard mode. And what I do after every raid, so we meet twice a week, is I track our progress. So the question is, are we making progress as a team? How are we doing? What do we have done well, and what are the things that we need to work on? Right. Those are the questions I'm trying to address and help my team with. So what I want to do is track a few things. One of the things I'm tracking is how fast did we clear each boss each week, and how many deaths resulted in those fights. And so in VSC, there's 3 bosses. There's Jasela, 12A, and Ansel. And what I've tracked here on this chart below is what is the best result each week in getting Ansel killed. And so the best ones are the ones with green dots. And what I try to do is take this trend line and, just point in general, what's the direction we're headed? We're headed down. We've had a blip over here in day 16, day 17, day 18. Those were kind of off weeks for a variety of reasons. But also try to track, because the most important thing is this Ansel fight. That's the hardest fight in this trial. And that's the one really that has to be learned. Is, where are we at in terms of where are we generally getting to? And we're kind of hovering in this 10% range right now, this team, of getting them down, which is with execute. So once you get past 20%, or what we call the RGB split, you're in execute range. So we're getting them consistently down into execute. The problem is we have a dying problem, as well as a damage problem. So we need to do more damage. We need to die less. This is a stat that I calculated on my own, which says for the health that we're getting also down to, how many deaths did it take to actually get there? So fewer deaths means more damage and a quicker fight. So, and I try to color code that. So this color coding in Excel can be done pretty easily using the this conditional formatting. It's all automatic. There's really nothing new. You just select one of these color ranges and it color codes these. So you can see, like on this day in particular, this is one of our best days in terms of lowest number of deaths and getting down into execute range. So we got them down to 12%. We only died 23 times as a team. So the other thing that as a raid leader looks at is your buff up times and debuff up times, which are really important because depending on the buff, it could do several things. Most buffs are oriented towards improving the team damage. So things like Major Force, Major Slayer, Major Courage, Minor Courage, Berserk, Powerful Assault, Pillagers is ulti regen. This buff here is more damage mitigation. And then debuffs generally is to improve the amount of damage taken. How much it improves. It's not a direct buff to an individual's damage, but it debuffs the enemy in such a way that the enemy is going to take more damage. So here you have Breach, Major, Minor, Crusher. Major Maim is actually reducing the damage output. So that means less damage to the team from the boss or enemies. Minor and Major Vuln, Off Balance, Alkosh Dagger, EC, MK, Martial Knowledge, and Minor Brittle. So all these are sort of damage taken buffs. The only one that's not is I just mentioned it, maim. And that one's usually what tanks do. Okay. So, and these are what I call the primary buffs and debuffs. Obviously, there's a lot more in the game, but these are the ones that as a trial leader, most trial leaders would be interested in. And the reason why we track these is it helps us to explain, like, why was there damage off this week? Like, did our uptimes come down? Did they go up? And you can also track individuals. So, there are team members or a team member specifically assigned to do certain things. Like we have an EC person running EC in the team, and I can track over the course of weeks, like, are their uptimes coming up and down? Or what direction are they going? Are they within an acceptable range? And if not, I can go talk to that person saying, hey, what's going on? I notice your uptimes were off this week. And so you can have those types of conversations and help coach and improve what the team's doing. So we'll actually take a look and show how, where these come from. But I find this helpful. Hey, yes. Hey, Mice, you're hearing noise from your microphone. So, and I find it helpful to put this together for the team because they don't have to go hunt and search for this information themselves. They can, I can put it all into a spreadsheet and throw it up on Discord, and they could just see for the week, like, how did the team do, right? The other thing that's really important is deaths. So, like, people obviously die in trials, and so the number one question that is often asked is, well, what are we dying to? And what can we do about that? So what I've started to do is analyze deaths. So this would be, okay, yeah, let's zoom into this. So the death recaps in ESO logs. So let's actually go into one. I'm going to switch to a different log. Actually, I'm going to pull one up from this core. Man, we have so many channels in Discord. Okay, here we go. If we go into death, oh, that's VLC. What am I doing? That's Twitch. Don't want that. Okay, here we go. Here, let's do this poll here. So generally you can do some analysis of deaths. So if you click into the deaths panel, this is what you get. You can see, like, by name and what killed the person. Was it a one shot, or did it take a couple, did it happen over time? And were there multiple other things damaging that player at that time? So here, this person died to poison mind, but we can see also that they had damage from a bolt, which comes from a memory fragment. So they took a total of 29k of damage, and at the time they were dying, they were getting hit with 5.3k of healing per second. Okay. So now what you can do with this list is it's by default sorted chronologically. So these deaths correspond with these bars in time, but we can click on the name. And so if we're looking at a particular player, you can see, okay, our main tank died once. Here's me. I died 3 times. So you can quickly see, like, did somebody die more than others? And so, for this person, they died 5 times. They died the most. You can also sort by killing blow to say what seems to be the things that the team is dying to most. And so for this fight, it's Poison Mind, which is quite common. And then Ignited. Those Ignited and Inferno seem to be, these three things, they're actually mechanics in the fight, are killing the team the most. And so these are the things, obviously, that we as a team need to work on to improve, because less deaths or no deaths means more damage. More damage means we clear. Now, where you want to start using the spreadsheet is if I go, so this is just one pull. This is wipe 4. Now, if I look at the entire trial, all wipes, I get some information, but it's not presented in a way that's easily consumable. So for example, you can see, here I died a lot. So the non-portal team are going to have more deaths generally. And then we can see what killed the team the most. Okay. Now, what it doesn't give us is who died to what. Now I can click in Poison Mind and see, it'll give me a separate list. It shows for that particular mechanic. Actually, that was damage. Let me, yeah, it does see it. If I click on it, it doesn't really show like when they died and how much. So it has limited utility in drilling down. And so what you can do, and what I do, and this is where we start to get into advanced analytics in Excel, is if you're interested in specific fights or as the whole trial, what I usually do is I look at the top 3 polls to say, if I look at the top 3, so it'd be like 8.2%, the 16 and 19, right? If I look at those fights, I can come down here, and if you see this little CSV button, see that, guys? That CSV stands for comma separated value. That is a file type. So if I click that once, you can see at the top right, it just downloaded all the data associated with these deaths to my download folder. And if I click on that, this is what it gives me. So here I have the name and the amount. Actually, this is damage. Hold on. That's DPS. I need death. Okay. Okay, so this is all the data behind that. So I can take this and let's say I wanted to come back and I want to analyze another set of deaths. And so I'm going to come back up here and choose wipe 16. And I'm looking at deaths, and I can download that file. And so I'm going to take the first one, and I'm just going to drop this one right below it. Okay. So now I've got those 2 pulls, and then let's say I'm interested in one more. So again, I come back up here, and this time I want to do wipe. What's the next best one? Probably this number 19. And again, I'm going to download that set of data. And I'll copy and paste that data into this sheet. Okay, so do you see what I'm doing here? I've got 3 pulls, so let's just call this pull. And this is wipe 7. And this was wipe. I had wipe 4 and wipe 6. So what I'm doing is I'm basically consolidating just the 3 best pulls to say, you know, if we take a look at the 3 best fights for the night and analyze those, it should tell us, we can then start to do a comparison of that, our performance for the night, that night versus some other point in time. And so what I've done is exactly that on here. So I've got the pull, time, phase, killing blow. And so now I can start to do some analysis. And here, let me blow this up. Might be a little hard to see. So if I wanted to get rid of this, and so all this data, as I just showed you, it comes directly from ESO logs. I can take a look at, let's say, the pull, and if I'm looking just first overall for the team, let's say, you know, phase of the fight, and we'll just do a rough count. So we can see, okay, for these, actually this is 4 pulls. I can see, you know, prior to the RGB split where the boss splits in 3, this is how many deaths we had. Once we get in towards execute, you know, we actually had more deaths once we get into execute than even after up to where Onslow splits, because this is really where it starts to get pretty hard. Now I can drill into this, and let's say I'm not interested in part of RGB because we know that that's pretty easy stuff. We can filter this out. So I'm going to put it over in filter and say we're just interested in RGB split. And let's see what is killing us. I need to take the killing blow. So we can see here again, you know, what's killing most of us is Poison Mind, followed by Ignited Inferno, which is what we saw in that first table, right? But then we can also throw in here, let's say we have the killing blow, is like, well, who's dying to that stuff? So here we can actually pull in the name and see, you know, for those 3 things, you know, we could start to build a table out, and which is exactly what I've done kind of here, is I've taken that and started to sort these by the mechanic based off of number deaths and who's dying to what. So that's kind of an overview of kind of how you build this stuff. And you can do the same thing on, you know, a lot of the other stuff, whether it's the fight stats. Now I mentioned, why don't we wrap this up with quickly going through and building out that one table. So let's look at the uptimes, and I'll show you a little bit about that. Or let me pause there while I'm searching for the stats. Any questions on what I just showed you? All right, so generally what I do for uptimes is there's a couple ways to do it. One is you could look at across the entire trial for the night, what were the uptimes, which gives you sort of an average, right? Or you could look at a specific fight or several fights. So if you want to look at the uptimes for a specific fight, you would click on the fight and you would start looking on the buffs and debuffs. So why don't we, I'll just go ahead and clear this out and we'll fill this out together. So if I wanted to go to major force, so the ones in green here, these generally would be on the buffs tab. So if we go to buffs, and you'll see that this is an important concept when you're looking at this, because people, when they first look at this, it's a little confusing, but you have to look at the group. So there's cooldown, which is what we're not interested in cooldown. Okay. What we're looking for is the damage buff. So you have to go down to the damage buff section. And what I do to find what I'm looking for quickly is I just hit Control F, which pops up a little search thing up here at the top. And I type, let's say force. So, or we could type major force. Okay, so I want to make sure that I am in the damage buff. So we're on the damage buff section. It highlights force, major force. So here we're at 46.43. Okay, so major slayer, again, we go up here, hit Control F, and we type in major slayer. Okay, again, double check here in the damage buff section, come down, and then this is 6507. Now you'll see there's some other ones here. It depends on if you're looking at individuals or the team. This cast, or this count, basically counts how many times there was a skill cast to proc Major Slayer. So this is the one that we're looking at. 65.07. And then Major Courage. Again, don't want cooldown, I want damage buff. So, okay, this is it here, 91.04. This is from SBC, by the way. Minor Courage, anybody want to know where Minor Courage comes from? This is going to be either Yolnacrons or from Xenas. So this is 94.32. A Major Berserk, this is the quiz time. Where does Major Berserk come from? This is a Sork buff, typically from their Atro, 11.7. Minor Berserk, who knows where Minor Berserk comes from? Generally speaking. Combat prayer, exactly right. So our healers, we look to our healers generally to provide Minor Berserk, 93.24. PA comes from PA. We'll do powerful. Okay, again, I always double check that I'm in the damage buff section. 69.65. So you can see, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but that's generally what I do to kind of pull this together, because the team generally wants to know where they're at on uptimes, and they also want to track week to week. How am I doing? Did I do better this week versus last week? So it's nice as a trial leader because it doesn't take all that long. It probably takes 10 minutes to kind of pull this table together. And then I can just post that for the group to see. Now, debuffs are a little bit different. So why don't we just do a few of these just to kind of give you a sense of how that works. So we did buffs. Now, if you come over to debuffs, this one's a little bit differently because we're looking at debuffs on enemies. So if you see here on the left-hand side where my little pointer's at, you want to click on enemies. So debuffs go on enemies. So you click on enemies. So now we're looking at the debuffs on enemies. And that's really important. Otherwise, you won't be able to find these. And it's sort of the same thing. So again, there's just one category. All debuffs are on enemies, so we're not looking at separate categories for like up for cooldown and stuff like that. And I do the same thing. You hit Control F, and then if, you know, let's say we're looking for a major breach, it's right up there at the top, 100. Minor breach is 100. Crusher. Okay, where's Crusher come from? Yep, from the, well, partially correct. It comes typically from a wall of elements, but from a Crusher glyph on the wall of elements you use to proc it. That's 81.3, and then major maim could come from multiple different places, but generally the tank is applying major maim, usually through their ice staff. The ranged taunt will apply breach, or I mean, it'll probably apply major maim. Here's minor maim, major maim 21.2. So I won't go through the whole list, but you kind of get the idea. All right. Any questions on that? All right. So we're probably a little bit over, but we probably exhausted the full hour that I wanted to do for this little training overview. Hopefully you guys got something out of it. I will take the recording and throw it up there on one of the streams and give you guys a link. But now I'll just open it up for general questions. I'm happy to stay longer if you have anything you want to cover. Or actually, you know, maybe you might find it interesting. Here, let me just share this. So in my core, generally what I do, so this is, I've got a channel here for logs performance review, and you can kind of see what I share. So, you know, here's buffs and debuffs uptime, and then I compare to prior week. Green means you're if improved. Red means you're lower than last week, and I actually, you know, show on here like who's kind of on point for providing those. You know, death recap, and then you know, I used to do, this is earlier on in the prog. Hold on. Find it. Yeah, like when we were starting to work through the various phases of Onsel. So with every run through the maze, you get a new mechanic added. So you know, it's basically showing like on average how many deaths are we having as a team after every maze run, and you know the majority of the deaths occur at the very end when you get into execute. So, but anyways, yeah. So questions.
The important thing is to execute and plan it.
Mhm. Yeah.
I did down.
Yeah, and if you do crash or DC, you have to restart encounter logs. Otherwise, they'll just stop right from the point that you disconnected from the game. Yeah, if you did really bad you don't want anybody else to see, then you can just delete it. Yeah. Yeah, there is a way to split the logs. It's kind of tedious. So some people just don't bother. All right. Any thoughts, feedback on what you saw and heard? Okay. All right. Well, happy to help out. Yeah, feel free to ping me if you have any questions or follow up. All right, guys. You're welcome. Thanks. Bye.